When I first started out as a freelance filmmaker, I had this idealized vision of what my life would be like once I'd made it. I guess I imagined that I'd be spending my time finding super interesting stories out in the world, locking in some funding, and then going off to shoot in exotic places and meeting fascinating new people. If that sounds like what you're hoping for too, then this video is for you. Because I hate to break it to you, but over the last 10 plus years of doing this full time, I've learned that this isn't really the way it all works. Now don't get me wrong here, this job has taken me all over the world and introduced me to some amazing people and cultures and given me a pretty decent income all at the same time. But the way I imagined this job would be and the way it really is are pretty different. And in this video, I'm going to break all of this down and give you the honest truth about what working as a professional freelance documentary filmmaker really looks like, so you have the best chance of making it work for yourself. And in case you think I'm discouraging you from starting, I'll just say right off the bat that even after all this time, I still do think this has to be one of the best jobs in the world. But if you want to go down this path, you should do it with both eyes open. Because what I thought this would be like 12 years ago when I started and what it's actually like are two different things. And so in this one, I'm going to dive into what I got wrong and what I wish I knew if I were starting again so that you can avoid the same mistakes that I made. So when I first started with photography and later documentary production, it was mostly something I did for fun. I'd been backpacking internationally more or less full-time for years, and I carried cameras just for the joy of documenting my travels. Basically what I'm saying is that it was a hobby, and for a lot of people out there, I'm guessing this is how you got into this stuff too. But the more I shot and the better I got, a little voice in the back of my head started wondering if it might be possible to turn this thing I did for fun into my full-time job. I mean, if I was spending all my free time thinking about it and practicing, why not make money from it and have a job that I loved? Any of that sound familiar to you? I'm not going to bore you by repeating the whole story of how I eventually went from a backpacker to a professional photojournalist and then later to a full-time documentary cinematographer, which is what I still do now. I'm actually in the middle of a long-term shoot in the Arctic right now, as you might be able to tell from my current office setup. You can find all that backstory though already on this channel if you're interested, but all you need to know is that over the course of 4 or 5 years, I successfully managed to go from hobbyist to full-time pro, and now it's been over 10 years since I've done anything else other than take photos or shoot video to support myself. So what did I think it would be like, and what is it really like? Like a lot of people, when I was just starting out, I'd look at successful or award-winning filmmakers and think, man, if only I could get paid to go all over the world making films that interest me, that would be the best life ever. Flash forward to now, and I still do think that in a lot of ways this is the best possible life I could imagine for myself, but I've learned a few realities that aren't at all what I expected. When I was in the early stages of my career, I guess I thought that filmmakers spent all their time coming up with project ideas and then just going out and making them. I didn't really think all that much about the nuts and bolts of the financial side of things, and I figured that if you made something good enough, people would pay for it. Coming from a photojournalism background, I was used to the process of shooting a personal project on my own time and then pitching it to an outlet like Al Jazeera or The Guardian or the New York Times or whoever, and then if it was good, they would pay you to publish it. But video, at least at the higher levels, doesn't really work like that. Mainly it comes down to budgets, and by that I mean that video is just so much more expensive than still photography that what they're willing to pay almost never equals what it costs to make. Now, it's totally possible to sell a short film to a news outlet or a website like I was doing with photos, and sometimes it's even well worth it to lose money because of the exposure you can get for your project. But if your plan is to pay bills with short films, I hate to say it, but it's probably not going to work for most of us, at least not in the way you might think it will. Let me give you an example. A good friend of mine who's a really well-established commercial director decided he wanted to make a documentary about a town that was destroyed by wildfires a couple years ago. He pitched a huge news outlet, I think it was The Guardian, and they agreed to buy his film for $5,000. That seems like a pretty nice fee to pocket, but then you realize that in order to make that film, he spent over $5,000 just on hiring the local producer who got him access to the community and helped him find the right characters to tell his story. Then when you add on the cost of hiring a DP, renting gear, accommodation, food, gas, and everything else, that film lost a considerable amount of cash even though it appeared on one of the world's largest news websites. Don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean it wasn't well worth it, it just wasn't profitable. The exposure that comes from getting your film in a place like The Guardian or The New Yorker or The Times or something like that can be worth much, much more than you spent making the thing in the first place, And that's part of the equation of making professional documentary filmmaking work for you. All you need is one aid organization or government employee in the right department or commercial agency or branded content producer to see that short and think, wow, that's amazing work. I want something like that for my next campaign. And then you can land a major client and make all your money back and then some. Do a good job, and then those clients turn into repeat clients, pass your name on to other people in their world, and then you're starting to have the makings of a profitable film business. Then you take that money, and after carving off what you need to live and pay your bills and seed your emergency fund, and then set aside a little bit for things like gear and savings and whatever, and then put the rest towards your next project you believe in, you can repeat the cycle all over again. Over time, your films will get better, the outlets and film festivals you get them into get better, and the people/potential clients watching increase, and that's how you grow your career. Your personal projects are the only place where you're free to fully showcase your unique style and let the world know what you have to offer so that then they can want the same thing for themselves and then give you money for it. Let me give you a few more personal examples. About 9 years ago when I was living in Cambodia, a friend and I decided we wanted to have a bit of an adventure, so we bought an 8-meter long wooden fishing boat and drove it around Southeast Asia's biggest lake for a few weeks. There was no budget and no real plan, but we documented the whole thing and put it together in a photo story and then published it onto my blog back when blogs were still cool. For a few days, nothing happened. Then, out of nowhere, an aid organization from Singapore reached out and said they'd seen the post and wondered if we'd be willing to expand the project to cover the entire Mekong River. And where the first trip cost us about $800, including the price of buying the boat, they were willing to give us a budget of $80,000. When that project was done, it also went online where it got more attention, and over the years I've sold dozens of those photos to news outlets and book publishers, creative agencies, universities, and research institutes all over the world and made back way more than the initial investment. So what does that mean for you, and what can you take away from experiences like this? Well, if you're really lucky and put in a lot of time, you might get to the point where your personal projects have such a big impact, like winning an award at Sundance or Hot Docs or the Oscars or something, that you find that big streamers are knocking at your door begging for the rights and offering you big money for it. Or they'll want to know what your next idea is so that they can fund it and get in on the ground level for your next big hit. That's totally possible, and there are a couple filmmakers I know in this very cool position. But that's the exception, not the norm. And for most of us out there, even people who've managed to sell our films to the Netflixes or Amazons of the world will probably still need some sort of commercial arm to our business. Or put it another way, a day job. For some of us at the beginning of the journey, a day job might mean keeping your 9 to 5 at the office and making films on your own time to feed your creative addiction. For others, it might be something more related to your art, like making commercials or working as an assistant on big sets. For me personally, I work as a DP on other people's projects like the massive budget survival show I've been working on for the last few months and I'm still working on now. Because while I really love this kind of shooting and I'm really happy to be out here in nature making this show, make no mistake about it, this is a day job for me. This project isn't my idea. I wasn't involved in the planning. They're not asking my opinion in any way once the shooting wraps, and I'm not going to get any of the credit or share any of the profit if it goes on to be the most viewed show of all time. In other words, this is 100% a day job. Earlier in my career, my day jobs were a lot less related to the industry. I started taking photos as an English teacher, and as I slowly transitioned towards full-time documentary shooting, I spent my summers working in forestry to save enough money for gear and travel. As I got better and my projects started to have more of an impact, my day job started to become more and more relevant to what I wanted to do, to the point where now it's been over 10 years since I've done anything non-camera related for money. The day jobs get better over time, but very few filmmakers out there can get by without one. So if you're out there shooting weddings when you really want to be making verite docs, or if you're making corporate videos when you actually care about sports documentaries, or maybe you're doing something completely non-film related for the moment, don't worry, this is all part of it. Once you accept that there's nothing wrong with having a day job, then you can start working towards securing better and better ones until hopefully one day they're in line with what you like doing. In my experience, one of the best ways to do that is to invest in those personal projects that cost you more than they make, but really show off what you can do. Then you leverage that exposure to slowly level up the quality of your day jobs until one day you wake up and realize that you're a full-time professional filmmaker. even if it doesn't look quite like you thought it would. Because if I'm being honest, working as a professional doc filmmaker isn't at all what I dreamed it would be like when I bought my first used cinema camera. In some ways it's worse, but in many other ways it's much, much better. I've had to shoot things I didn't care about and other things that I absolutely loved and went on to win Emmys. And then others still that were so bad that I'll never tell anyone I was involved. Sometimes I'm at home for months on end dreaming up my next film idea, and other times I'm sitting in the Arctic Circle freezing my butt off like I am right now. That kind of variety is what most professional careers look like, and it's going to be the same for almost all of us. That's just the reality of committing to this path for the long term. But with all that said, it's absolutely 100% worth it. This job will take you all over the world, seeing things and meeting people that you never imagined while keeping you creative and engaged with the world. You can free yourself from the rat race and live an unconventional life where every day is different, and that's a real gift and privilege considering how tough life can be for some people out there born into difficult circumstances. Now, I might not love every single job I have to take on to support my life, and I might not get to do my own projects like I imagined I would, but at the end of the day, I'm living the way I want and experiencing the world in a way that most people don't get to. And you can too. Just make sure that you know what it really looks like. Accept the negatives that come with the incredible positives, and then enjoy the ride. See ya.